Guys and girls, mammoths. Now, loads to say about these guys, and let's get going, okay? And here we go. Now, the one thing that can be said about mammoths is that they are very, very important creatures indeed. In fact, a mammoth, we know more about the mammoth than we do about our human ancestors before about 10,000 years ago. We know so much about mammoths. For example, Bill, if you fell dead 10,000 years ago, right, the most we could have of archaeologists representing you is the odd bones and a tooth, right? A mammoth, we would have everything except the squeal. We'd have the flesh, we'd have the organs, we'd have the hair, we'd have the height, we'd have the sex, we'd have everything, okay? Now, if we found a single bone from you, Bill, a rib bone and a tooth, we won't even know what sex you were. We won't be able to get an idea what age you were, but not too very close. But a mammoth, we get the complete caboodle. We don't get these types of remains in Britain, but what we do find is a complete set of skeletal remains, and complete sets of skeletal remains were found in Shropshire in 1986. 5 of them, actually. Now, one question to one of you in the room, and that's it. Okay? Bill, why did the mammoths become extinct? And I'll give you a straight answer. Chuck it out.
Their meat of sustenance dried up.
Oh, that's fine. If you said it was because of human beings, I would have shot you down. That's ideal. That's ideal. Now, we found 5 mammoths in Britain. 5. And the wonderful thing about those 5 mammoths in Britain, in Shropshire, complete skeletal remains, is that they show no signs of being killed by human beings. Now, that's important. Those date from about 14,000 years ago, when the Ice Age was still ravenous across Britain, and we know that we had people living in Britain 14,000 years ago. This itself is Mashka. Mashka, like many of these mammoths, which are on display today, have been found over the past 100 years. But you can imagine Napoleon's soldiers marching across the icy landscapes of Russia and his retreat, and Russian soldiers who knew where mammoths were found, frozen in the tundra, would find an easy, quick meat source. Mammoth meat has been known to be very tasty after being frozen for 14,000 years. And apparently it tastes quite good. We've lost a lot of mammoths because they've been feasted upon, because they're a readily available meat source. But we do have lots of them which are really intact, still surviving. Those that have been to the Canary Islands, Bill will know about the Guauche mummies. In the 1500s, there were tens of thousands of Guauche mummies. Now, there's about that many left on the planet the Earth. Guauche mummies, some of the original inhabitants of the Canary Islands, they were taken on board ships to be used as fuel, who were refueling in the Canary Islands, and some were taken off to be used in medicine to deal with stomach aches. If you ground down skeletal remains of people who have been mummified into a powder, it's good for stomach ache. Yeah, apparently. Guauche mummy from the Canary Islands. No, Guauche, it's the people. Guauche people. Now, Mashka is not something that we'd find in this country, but it is a mammoth that we do find in this country. Right. Now, I said to you last week, should you fear a big elk, right, with its massive reindeer thigh that would hit the ceiling, right? Yes, if you had an elk charging towards you, you're not going to last 5 minutes. And it's the same as one of these beasts, okay? That's really Hollywood. People 13,000 years ago, being chased by a huge mammoth. That looks more like a cross between a mammoth and an African elephant, okay? But that's meant to portray a mammoth. Talking about sizes, European mammoths the same size as the African elephant. Siberian mammoths the same size as the Asian elephant, and the ones that we find on various islands in the Bering Straits, the remains of them, were the size of those Borneo elephants, very small, okay? When you get more and more isolated and less food, you get smaller and smaller, believe me. Look at Dorothy. We won't do the beast in North America yet.
What about mastodons?
Mastodons. Bill, it's explained.
Mastodon is bigger than mammoth, I understand. Is that right?
About the same size, actually. This gives you an idea of comparison of size. That is basically a mammoth from Siberia. That's a European mammoth. And that's a human being, to give you an idea of scale. So if you talk about the average height of the human being being about 5'8", so if you look at that there, the mammoth is still slightly taller. Mammoths were huge beasts, and you treated mammoths with respect. And you know, tragically, I forgot that I'm missing one file today that actually shows you a mammoth bone, right? Wait for it. A mammoth bone carved with an image of a mammoth. That to me is very significant. And why is it significant? Human bones. Cannibalism. You don't see human bones with images of human beings on. Just don't happen. Just don't happen. You don't see wolf femurs or tibias with carvings of wolves on. It just don't happen, right? But for some strange reason, they would carve a mammoth into a mammoth bone. And I think that's significant. We think, Barely didn't say this, but I wish you had, so I could have had a go at you. Mammoths themselves were said to have become extinct because they were hunted into extinction by our human ancestors. Okay? That's simply not true. And there's a reason for that. There were large herds of mammoths, very few people around, and human beings would have had to go deliberately out every single where over Britain and everywhere to follow these beasts and to survive killing them. It just didn't happen. Okay, humans may have killed a few mammoths, but they weren't the reason for them becoming extinct. Right, let's move on. And here we go. This is the hunting range. This is the hunting range and grazing range of the mammoth itself.
It's lying down.
Not
Yes.
really.
It's lying down.
Yeah. That's right.
This is the map of the earth.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's lying down.
But it's the wrong way up, isn't it?
Oh, it's well.
Depending which way you look at it, right?
No, I don't.
Okay. That there is obviously Great Britain.
Yeah.
That's the Scandinavians going all the way through Russia, all the way through to Siberia. These are where the mammoths grazed and lived. Here, that was all frozen ice, guiding all the way into North America. Okay, that's the range of the mammoths themselves. We know, this is why we start to know that the mammoths didn't become extinct because of human beings. We know that the mammoths were already going extinct before human beings really started to arrive in North America. That tells us that there were other factors that led to the mammoths becoming extinct. Has anyone ever thought about the woolly rhinoceros?
What?
The woolly rhinoceros. Don't hear about woolly rhinoceroses, do we? Simply because nobody has really done much research on them, but they must have been alongside the woolly mammoth. That there is an image of a mammoth from 1800. That's what they look like. They only started to identify that mammoths existed from bones in the late 1700s. It looks like a pig. It's a weird looking beast. That's what they thought mammoths once looked like. But now we know they look very, very different from that.
Oh,
That's me.
they do look different.
They do look different.
Oh, look at that head.
Now, the mastodon is the one on the right, and the mammoth is the one on the left. Mastodons are usually seen without, from what I can make out, usually don't have as long tusks as that. Basically, a mastodon is a really, really early form of mammoth, but they probably would have lived on this planet at the same time as well. That's clearly a mammoth. And one thing that I used to remember when I was a child, right, when you used to get little boxes of dinosaurs, right, you always had a mammoth in there. I could never work that out because mammoths, geologically, are so far distant from dinosaurs, you may as well put a model of a human being in there as well. But the older world, the animals, they become extinct, like the saber-toothed tiger and all the rest of it. But we do know that they existed. And again, why they become extinct is still very much an enigma. This is an example of a mammoth found in Stuttgart, Germany. And you can see that you've got these wonderful feet. This example from Stuttgart, really well formed. And when you see animals that are really well formed like this, it starts to make you think that obviously they're not being interfered with by human beings. But as we're there, right, I'm going to do this for Glenda. As we're there, if you're a human being, you're part of a small group of humans wandering across the plain, or a group of Neanderthals, you might think, oh my God, the mammoth has just dropped dead. And it's still warm. So, as it's still warm, you can bleed it. The blood itself from a mammoth will warm you up. Next, you can gut the animal. And then live inside the shell of the beast itself. You can see how that's possible. If the animal falls the right way, you can chuck all the guts out, and overnight you're going to be really warm in the mammoth's carcass, and that's where you can live. And you can ward off any other animals, because you can then use that carcass for clothing. You can use the ribs itself for shelter and everything else. And the old adage with a pig, they used to eat everything except for the squeal. And that's what you can say with the mammoth as well. Mammoths were very angry beasts, like any beast, like a human being when threatened. So it's probably, and human groupings would probably see that you had really old mammoths at the end of the herd, and all you need to do is wait for them to drop dead, and they drop dead, and you've got a ready-made meal there. You can use everything: sinews, you can use the hide, you can eat the flesh, you've got the skins, you've got the ivory itself, everything. Now, it's a bit divisive, this one, actually. So if we look at this, that's more like the Siberian mammoth. That's more like the European mammoth. And that's the little ones that have been isolated on the islands. Really dwarf small mammoths, because they're so isolated on the islands. Food is very short, and they've remained there. Some people believe there's different theories for the extinction of the mammoth. One theory is that sometime in about sometime in the year 14,000 years ago, a meteor hit the Earth. All the mammoths and all the big beasts in North America were wiped out, and the ones in Europe survived. Problem with that theory, it would have wiped out the human beings who'd got to North America as well. The other theory is that there wasn't enough food for them. They couldn't graze properly. The other theory is that they were wiped out by human beings, and so on and so on. Now, this is quite cute. The reason why this is quite cute, this is cave art. And you can think what you may of this, but this is that really nice, interesting cave art. Spot the mammoth. There she is. And what you've got a mammoth underneath this carving, and underneath this carving. And the mammoth is over earlier carvings as well. So what we're talking about, we got the association of making images of mammoths at the expense of making images of human beings. Only 1% of portable carvings of carvings, parietal art, which is fixed art in caves. Only 1% it represents human beings. The 99%, the vast majority, represents varying animals. And there's probably lots of reasons why that is, but they love their mammoths. To actually draw a mammoth like that, there was a mammoth outside the cave. You drew it. It's not imagined. If you try and imagine things, you always get it wrong. I've done this in archaeology. I've taken people on walks and I said, right, what we're going to see now, we're going to see this big thing with sort of huge walls and there's banks and ditches around it. We get there and I think I've come to somewhere else because the mind actually plays tricks on you. So therefore I'm saying that this was drawn by somebody who'd actually seen a mammoth. And we can work out, if you can actually date this, you can work out that there's still mammoths around when this was created.
That looks like ibex.
That's probably an ibex, yeah.
Where is this cave?
This is at Rouffignac in France. Rouffignac. Rouffignac. Yeah. Oh, Rouffignac. IGNAC. Go on, Pig. Bill.
Nothing about mammoths here. They're not sort of horned animals, like sort of orcas and things like this.
Nothing. Yeah.
That would be later.
Well, this is what's happened. No, but it's a bit of a mixed match. What really happens is that there were aurochs around at the same time as the mammoth, but there were small herds, and you've got to talk about competition for resources. The bigger beasts are always going to be the winners. It's like the big dinosaurs; they were always the winners, and those smaller animals took time to develop. When the dinosaurs went, the smaller animals become vast and very numerous because they could eat all the food. It's the same with the mammoths. When the mammoths went, things changed. And in fact, the mammoths going had a huge detrimental effect on the landscape of the planet, northern hemisphere of the whole of the planet Earth. Because what was happening before, the mammoths were grazing and they were eating all of the plant, all the low-lying plants and the mosses and the grasses. And any little shrubs and stuff, right, they would eat them, yeah? But in the summer, and they would eat them in the summer months and the winter and all the rest of it. But with the mammoths gone, all those little shrubs remain in the summer months and they dry out. You have all these wildfires, okay? And that has a catastrophic effect on the environment. Before that, you didn't have all these wildfires, and we know that. We've got a little article that we're going to read. Anyway, moving on again. So here we go. You don't get this with a human being 10,000 years ago. Actual hair, mammoth. And this is mammoth tusk dating. Don't get excited, Dorothy. You're not going to go on a dating site looking for somebody mammoth tusk. This is mammoth tusk dating. And the wonderful thing about mammoth tusks is if you look at that, you can get an idea of environmental conditions from the rings. It's a mammoth tusk. And you can actually work out the age of the mammoth. And if this is actually still attached to the mammoth, you can obviously work out the age of death of the mammoth as well. And this is all preserved in these wonderful lines. I think this has been discussed by world funds and UNESCO and the UN about possibly the introduction of mammoth ivory into the ivory market to stop existing elephants from being butchered and slaughtered. Because some of this, as you can see, that's a nice bit of pure ivory. And that's mammoth ivory. Now, if you think that the mammoths were not respected and they were just there to be slaughtered, this is known as a spear thrower. Now we're looking at weird objects from the Mesolithic, Paleolithic period in the next few weeks. And by the way, we're doing the lost land between Wales and Ireland, otherwise known as the Irish Sea. So that's what we're actually doing next week. But this is actually meant to be associated as a spear thrower. Okay, but it's in the shape of a mammoth. And the way the spear thrower works is that you put a spear in that end, I've no idea how these things work, and it would somehow throw a spear out. No idea how it works, but that's known as a spear thrower, but it's carved like a mammoth. Again, let's go on, let's go a bit further on, and here we go. Look at this example. This is Dima in Russia. Now, if this mammoth died at the hands of human beings, it'd be nothing but bones. It wouldn't be skin and bones. This probably indicates this baby mammoth may have starved to death. It's really emaciated. I know it would look emaciated after 11,000 years, but it's really emaciated. Trunks haven't developed. It's fairly young, and this is known as Dima. And there are lots of these examples that have been found now. And it's seemingly that lots of baby mammoths are being found intact.
Oh, did you see that program? And the baby got drowned?
Yes. Baby mammoth drowned.
Baby mammoth drowned.
This itself, the caption's actually wrong at the top. This was actually trawled up, wait for it, in the Irish Sea. Intact. If this had been killed by human beings, right, those tusks wouldn't be there for a start. Okay?
It's like a door knocker.
You could probably use it as a door knocker. But that was found trawled up intact. The Irish Sea. And that would indicate that comes from a time when the Irish Sea was grazing land, and probably dates that skull probably around to about 12,000 years ago.
Is it half a skull, Carl? Just your cap on top?
It's a full skull.
It's a flat head.
There you go, that's a full skull. And you haven't got the lower mandible, but that's a full skull.
Where's his eyeballs? What would they be? Each side?
There.
So right underneath you can see the grave bit just underneath the tongue bit. Oh. No, other bit. And again, to your right. Go to your right now. It's that grey bit there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that part of the skull as well?
That's all the skull, yeah. That's all the skull. And actually, that's one of the molars underneath. You can actually see that.
Would they be black or is that coloration from the sea?
That's probably coloration from the sea, but then again, that's probably coloration from the sea. But with age, they you never know, they could be. Now, if we look at this, ties in nicely with next week as well. What we've got here is this map is probably a little bit out, but about 14,000 years ago, this was actually all connected with Europe. Okay, this was all completely connected with Europe. And about 12,000 years ago, obviously, there was an extensive ice sheet across all of this. Yeah. Now, what's happening is around approximately 8,000, approximately about 10,000 years ago, we're starting to see the loss of the connection with Ireland, which is there. All of this land has been lost, and all these little green areas, about 10,000 years ago, are just about to be lost. About 8,000 years ago, all this remaining area was actually lost, and then we were disconnected from Europe. The first Brexit vote, and the first Brexit vote lasted until 1974, when we could become part of Europe again. I know. Glenda voted to stay in Europe. She's that type of woman. This itself is a mammoth tibia, trawled up in a trawling net from the North Sea or the Irish Sea. You can obviously see all the crustaceans and all the fish there. These bones are being trawled up on a regular basis, and it's that thing that Doggerland itself we always see associated with our human ancestors, but there's this massive link with these mammoths. And the point is that mammoths must have lived alongside human beings in harmony. Humans just didn't say, oh, look at that, there's a big meal over there. They respected them. We know they respected them because they carved mammoths into bones of mammoths, which is really odd. What do you think? Listen to this, Anne, right? Listen to this, right? Somebody that you love has just died, right? I'm going to give you one of their bones to take away with you, right? would it have been far easier to take one of those bones away with you, which actually had an inside image of the person who once possessed that bone? They don't do that, but they do that with mammoths. What were you going to say, Anne?
Oh God, I don't know.
That's good.
That's why I got to say it when I think of it.
I'm going to tell you a little. I'm going to share a little story with you, right? And Anne will know the background to this story, right? We had our first coffee morning in Barry this one time, right? I was one of the last to leave, and the woman's house that we had this coffee morning, she's about 80. She said, "Oh, come on, Carl, come upstairs to my bedroom."
Did you?
No, this is me. She said it with me. She said, "Oh no, that's what me and Anne did a few years ago. Yeah, that's between me and Anne anyway." But she lives in a bungalow. Anyway, look, stop it, Bill. Anyway, she said to me, "Come up to my bedroom," and I'm thinking, right, okay, she's 80. I've got something to show you, and I'm thinking, right, okay, up, this is a bit too much. And we got to the top of the stairs, and she says, "I lay with this every night," and I'm thinking, I need to go. But she closes the door behind me. So I'm thinking, oh no. And she says, she takes me over to the windowsill and she shows me this huge mammoth tooth, right? Bigger than these here. Huge mammoth tooth, okay? And she shows me this huge mammoth tooth. And she says, "I told you so. I go to bed with this every single night." And she loves it, you know, this big mammoth tooth. And what mammoths themselves had 2 or 3 sets of teeth. So what would happen? The ones. So obviously you've only got part of the skull. This is obviously the upper portion of it. There would be other ones that would come forward once these had all ground away. Yeah. So they would just fall out, and you'd have another one coming down to the front. Except when you'd lost all your big teeth, that was it. You just starved to death. There were about 3 or 4 of these in reserve up here, and they'd come forward to grind. And that's basically why you find lots of their teeth. This was trawled up in the North Sea.
Yeah, when you think about it, it must be a way of dying, you know, the way a lot of animals died, they lost their teeth.
Well, you've lost all your teeth and you're still alive. Anyway, look at this. Look at this. For example, in Denmark, they so love the fact that they're trawling up all these mammoth teeth, all these elk bones, bones of even woolly rhinoceroses. They're trawling all this up. This is just one laboratory in Denmark, which are just full of these bones. They're absolutely fascinating bits of evidence. Very few of them show any signs that any of them were involved with human beings. We do see that there are butchery marks in some of the mammoth bones and some of the other bones up there, but most of the time we find that the cause of death was old age or eaten by other animals. We don't want to do that. I know we're not going to do it today. We got wolves, which I wanted to do today, but I did manage to do it in Landswick Major. The idea with a wolf, for example, we're going to get back to mammoths as well. The idea with a wolf is that they are absolutely hated by human beings. The other side of the coin, mammoths, we get some kind of kinship. Wolves, absolutely hated throughout history. There are very few references that fondly talk about wolves. You don't see wolf bones with a nice image of a wolf in it. Archaeologists have a tendency to give the wolf really bad publicity. At the site of Hoyk, up in Northumberland, they found some bones from approximately just over 9,000 years ago. They found some bones that they felt were from a dog. Okay, and they came to the conclusion that they must have been from a dog. Obviously, a domesticated wolf. They must have come from a dog because they couldn't get around the concept that the wolf may have been cohabiting with the humans in one way, shape, or form. So they never really come to that. And I've always said that you must never give a wolf the taste of human flesh. If you don't give the wolf a taste of human flesh, they won't be interested in you. Somebody in my Landswick Major class said today, they said actually they used to keep rats, and the golden rule with a rat is that you feed a rat vegetarian food. Okay, you don't give it any meat, and as soon as you give the rat meat, it'll start to snap at you. Up until that point, they're docile. And that's the point. Glenda, you and I, we've just lost an LP member of our group. Okay? Now, there's a pack of wolves. We can hear them in the distance. Oh! We can hear them in the distance.
Yep.
Now, we can either encourage those wolves to follow us and track us and to hunt us down, pick us up one by one, or we can discourage them by eating the person that's just died.
Show no way.
All right then, that's it then. But the thing is, that's the point. If you give a wolf a taste for human flesh, he will eat human flesh. That's it. So you've got to dispose of your bodies in a way that wolves won't be interested in you.
Burn them. I suppose they're
Yeah, we'll do that.
scavengers, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
I suppose they kill you, could kill you as well. I don't know.
But only if they get a taste for your flesh. We find the remains of wolves associated with caves. In the cave, this is one from Plymouth, a jawbone of a young wolf, and this is from in the south coast here, another Paleolithic cave from about 13,000, 14,000 years ago. This is Kent's Cavern, a full skull, and this is really interesting. A small sea stack on Hander on the Hebridean coast of Scotland, where the Scots once buried their dead to prevent their graves from being desecrated by wolves. They went to quite great lengths to bury their loved ones on this rock. How they managed to do it, I don't know, but apparently that's where they buried them.
So you just had secret.
Might do. But this is more recent times we're talking about. Anglo-Saxons, the idea of hunting wolves. The wolves have gone a-running. When the wolves go a-running, you've got to be very careful. Back a bit more to the mammoths as well. And then what we're going to do, we're going to take a very quick break. I know it's a little bit late today, but I'll make it up to you next week if we don't do wolves, okay? Bill, I've got to be here 2 o'clock next week, and I was here 2 o'clock last week, wasn't I?
No.
I was.
No, you said you were, but you weren't.
I was here at 2 o'clock the previous week, though, wasn't I?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. So
Anyway,
anyway, move on with this. This is something about mammoths, okay? If you want to bear this in your mind quickly, we'll just do this with this chart. Mammoths, these green areas were like where we think mammoths grazed, right? So 126,000 years ago, when we see lots of links with mammoths, there ain't a great deal number of them on the planet. By about 42,000 years ago, there's loads of them. By about 6,000 years ago, there are very, very few mammoths left on this planet. In these red areas, one or two of the islands, that's where the mammoths are. By around 1,500 years ago, mammoths are completely extinct on this planet. They do survive on one or two of these Bering Islands here, but that's it. What's going on here is that the reason why there's loads of mammoths is because they're able to sort of intermingle. They're able to find each other.
You can see the vegetation area is shrinking, can't you?
Yes.
Which is green.
Yes.
So that's a factor.
So obviously what's going on is that it's clear that these isolated pockets don't meet up with each other. The gene pool gets more and more restricted. And just think about it this way, right? Mammoths probably evolutionarily went backwards. What we do find is lots of examples of mammoth babies in, for example, Russia. Babies are obviously starved, fallen into areas they could get out of, and so on. We've obviously got lots of big beasts. And it's likely this. So say you've got a herd of like 20 mammoths, and you've got a group of 20 wolves over there, and you've got 3 or 4 baby calves. The wolves are going to touch this herd. The mammoths are going to gather around the little calves, as we see with African elephants. They're going to protect them, right? But and we see this with whales as well, when we've got great schools of whales, right, the baby calves are okay. But if you've got one mother and a baby calf, the killer whales will go for the baby calf, right? The mother won't be able to protect it. It's the same with mammoths. This is evolutionary. This is the type of Attenborough stuff, okay? So if you've got a group of 20 wolves, and you've got a herd of just 3 mammoths and a baby, right? You're just going to have to abandon that baby because the 3 adult mammoths are not going to survive unless they bolt, and they're not going to be able to protect that baby. That's probably what happened to the mammoths. They were evolutionarily unable to protect their young, and they just got older and older. There's a group of humans over there. 1 mammoth dies, we're going to feast upon it. You've got 2 big beasts left now, and that's when you get to extinction levels. There was a program years ago, it was about the curlew, right? It was a really weird thing. It used to say, once there were many, then there were few, then there were 10, and then there was 2, and then there was 1, and soon there'll be none. And that's exactly what happened to the mammoths.
Did you say
Curlew, yes.
Oh, that's a nice picture.
So what I'm going to do now, we're going to take a very, very quick break. We'll do the collection of stuff, a very, very quick break. And I mean a quick break. So let's do it now.
Okay.
Stop the clock, go. Archaeological discovery ever made. So what we've got here, we've got Mammoth Tusk, which could date back 14,000 years, found washed up on British beach in magical discovery. Now, looking at that there, does that look a bit like a bit of timber? Apparently, the people who found it thought it was a bit of timber. Yeah, it was found in the sands and the muds on Mersey Island in Essex, not so many years ago. And you know, these types of things are being washed up all the time. This computer's playing up a minute. Here we go. These types of things can be Porthcawl, yeah, exactly. It's not clear how old the tusk is, but the last mammoths are believed to have walked Britain 14,000 years ago. This is interesting. 14,000 years ago, when the last mammoth may have walked Britain, but we know that they were in the Irish Sea when that was all land, and Doggerland 10,000 years ago. So maybe they didn't sort of go into Britain because it was all full of trees and stuff, but they were still in this sort of area. We came across it by chance. It is incredibly fragile and quite rare. Dog walkers and beachgoers have been urged to keep an eye out for unusual pieces of wood that could turn out to be invaluable artifacts. And there they are, studying it on the beach. So the reason why I'm showing you this is that this type of archaeology is being found by complete accident. It's being washed up on the beaches, not by trawler nets out at sea. So I want to look at this now. This is actually these in Shropshire, Britain's last mammoths. When they say Britain's last mammoths died when they fell en masse into an enormous pit left by melting ice. Bit of context to this. They were found whilst they were looking for gravel, extracting gravel in a gravel pit in Shropshire in 1986. 5 mammoths were found, 4 baby mammoths, 1 adult mammoth, and they believe that they ended up there because they fallen through a kettle hole. Basically, what that is that you've got solid ice like that, okay, and then the ice is starting to melt. So you've got a hole started to form in the ice. So you've got a baby mammoth going in there to take a drink. Bit of the ice collapses, falls into the water. Adult falls in. 3 other mammoths fall in. Job done, and they all drown. So that's known as a kettle hole. They all fall down into the gravels down below. All other material falls on top of it, and they're found 14,000 years later, and they're relatively intact. And what is amazing about these is that there's no signs that they've been killed by human beings, which is really important. So that tells us again that the mammoths didn't become extinct in Britain due to being butchered and killed by human beings. They died by accident and naturally. It's like those tar pits in North America. The remains confounded scientists, and the mammoths are believed to have drowned. These kettle holes would have been honey traps. The discovery in 1986 was made by chance by Eve Roberts, who noticed large bones sticking out of a pile of clay when out walking a dog in the gravel quarry at Condover. Professor Lister, who's an expert in all these wonderful things, says that the condor mammoths discovered by chance in 1986 are a remarkably well-preserved assemblage of partial skeletons unique in Western and Central Europe. The skeletons were preserved in a kettle hole infill and recovered in situ. They required careful reconstruction, but they were all intact. This revealed the skeletons of a 28-year-old adult male woolly mammoth. Let's just stop there and take track. These are all bone remains, okay? These are bone remains from 14,000 years ago. Not one single set of human remains from 14,000 years ago has been found intact. So immediately we know more about mammoths than we do about our human ancestors, straight away. We know where mammoths are going because of all the tusks and everything are found. It's the same as where we find flints and axe heads from humans, but the mammoths have the edge over this, largely complete except for the cranium. Part of the skull. The partial skeletons of 4 or 5 juveniles in the age of 3 to 6, plus sparse remains of a sub-adult individual. So we've basically got a mammoth, except for a tiny bit of the skull, completely intact. We've got nothing like that in the human record. We only get little bits of human remains from 14,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, and then we start to get complete human remains being found in Britain. The condor mammoths are so important because the adult mammoth is by far the best preserved woolly mammoth skeleton found in Britain, and the specimens are the only late glacial skeletons in Western Europe. So there's a little family becoming extinct in this spot. This is very interesting. They found that whenever prehistoric humans spread to continents and islands, the megafauna quickly died out. I don't think that's actually true there. Okay, I think this says about the humans being the cause for mammoth extinction. I don't think that's the case. The nail in the coffin that puts humans firmly in the frame for the genocide of millions of some of the largest land animals to have walked the earth, I believe that is now false. That statement is false because many times in the history of the earth, mammoths seem to have been butchered and thousands of them in said areas killed and all the rest of it, but they seem to come back. We've got an example of that in a short while, found in Jersey at St. Bridal's Bay. In 1951, mammoth meat was allegedly served in New York. It was claimed to have been taken from a frozen carcass found on an island in Alaska, one of those islands that the last mammoths were sort of holed out on. So here we go. I think this piece is really, really, really interesting. This piece is interesting. Study into Jersey Neanderthal mammoth hunters. Now, the reason why I just said that thousands of mammoths may have died in certain areas, but they seem to come back, whether they were hands of human beings or not. This is evidence for that, because Jersey, they found a large collection of mammoth bones dating back to 250,000 years ago, all seemingly butchered by our Neanderthal cousins. But this was 250,000 years ago, thousands of years before the final extinction of the mammoths. So whenever they were herded into an area and killed by human beings on Neanderthals, there was some elsewhere that would survive and continue on the population of mammoths. To say that the human beings were simply responsible for the massacre of all these mammoths and all the other great beasts on this planet is not easy to believe. And the reason why it's not easy to believe is as follows. Approximately 12,000 years ago, Doggerland, the population of that area of the Irish Sea, which was land, Great Britain, all that area, the population was probably in the thousands in the sense of human beings. There was probably that many mammoths still wandering around. And if you put those small populations so widespread across the area, there's no way that those human beings could track down every last mammoth and kill them. There's no way possible. Because there would be trees and there would be open areas and all the rest of it. And there's no way it would have happened. So to blame our ancestors is wrong. Looking at this piece of evidence here from Jersey itself, archaeologists are investigating the truth behind the story that Ice Age Neanderthals in Jersey would push mammoths off cliffs in St. Brailade's Bay, which wasn't a bay back then, for food. About 30 years ago, evidence suggested early residents of what is today the island of Jersey chased the giant mammals off the cliff at Le Caux above Croissant in Jersey. I know my French there. It was in the 70s and the 80s that the hypothesis was put forward that Neanderthals were grouping together to drive herds of woolly mammoth and woolly rhinoceros off the cliffs and butchering them. Stop a minute. Stop. It's all good, but there's only 2 spaces that we can actually say that mammoths were actually butchered properly. Okay? There's a site in Norfolk that they've excavated, but there's no evidence in Norfolk thousands of years ago to say that the mammoths were alive when our human ancestors were tracking them down. It might be that they were just feasting on flesh of a mammoth that had just dropped dead in Norfolk, for example. But this interesting site in Jersey is very, very different. It actively shows that Neanderthals were gathering together with these vulnerable woolly rhinoceros and woolly mammoths to maybe butcher them. But there may be a lemming effect with these mammoths as well. They may have become slowly isolated in Jersey, not able to get over to the mainland. And it may be that they had nowhere else to go. In that circumstance, animals lead themselves to extinction. The idea of lemmings, there's too many lemmings, they all jump off cliffs, that's actually real. So if it can happen with small animals, it might happen with big animals. Let's kill a large chunk of us deliberately so a small number survive. No one has ever really questioned it, so we are going back, reassessing the information. We don't know, we are never going to completely understand, but we just want to know more about the Neanderthals to help us understand the Neanderthals. And that tells me a lot for another reason. Archaeologists seem to be so more interested in human populations than they are with animals. We come looking at mammoths from the back door, okay? We think of mammoths as these nice cuddly little animals that were out there butchered by human beings, and that's all we know about them. We don't know much more than that, because whenever we try to get close to mammoths, we always look to see what the human beings are doing, and not actually the mammoths themselves. These remains date from a time when the view from Croissant was not sea, but a huge treeless, tundra-like landscape looking all the way over to modern-day France. Groups of nomadic people would move northwards in the spring, following the animals to their summer pastures in the place where England is today, and Jersey itself, Croissant. It was thought these nomadic people would hunt for food by sneaking up on grazing animals and making them stampede over the edge. Did that happen, or was there a more logical reason? A mammoth would have been about the size of an African elephant, weighing up to 6,000 kilograms, 6 tons, which is the equivalent of 10 mini cars crushed together in weight, which is extremely heavy. Right, Glenda, right, what I want you to do is go out, get Alan to get 10 scrap mini cars, crush them all down, and to see how much that actually weighs. In other words, mammoths were bloody heavy beasts indeed. And the other thing as well is, there's no logic to killing a whole herd of mammoths. One would be enough to feed a family for quite some time, okay? And you're endangering the group by killing all these mammoths as well, because you're going to attract other beasts. When you attract wolves, you can't compete with a pack of 30 to 40 wolves and there's only 10, 15 human beings, okay? You need to run. So it's illogical to think that our human ancestors are killing thousands and thousands of mammoths. If you are faced with a 6-foot hairy mammoth and you are armed with a sharp stick, you have to have a bit of an edge, and you're not going to charge at it. They think this sort of happens, but they'd be very difficult animals to scare. There's this massive beast, right? And if it raised its tusks, would sort of tap the ceiling, right? Massive beasts. And if you've got 10 of these beasts and you've got 15 human beings, there's no competition. So why they're going over the edge might not just be to do with human beings. We always think, and then when the bodies go over the edge, you are then butchering them. It makes sense. Instant flesh. Instant something to eat. So we don't really know what's going on there. Once they've recorded these, I can take very clear, high-definition digital photographs to try and understand. I record the age of the animals to see if they resemble natural deaths or whether it is indicative of human hunting or other carnivores, sort of making them stampede off the edge, or is it just humans feasting off the flesh and so on. I want one of you to do a piece of homework next week. It's really, really important, right? Glenda, picking on you. Can you actually see? You know, we used to watch Tarzan films from the 1930s.
You want me to watch Tarzan films?
No, listen, right?
Sorry.
You know, I've been watching those when I was in the 1980s, right? You would have been obviously watching these in the 60s and 70s. In the 1980s, I used to watch Tarzan films, right? And they were all filmed in the 1930s, right? And every other program, right, would be the elephant graveyard, right, where the elephants would go to die. And all the hunters would go there to try and get the ivory, and Tarzan would save the female hunter and leave the other guy to die. Do elephants really all go to one place to die? And if that's the case, it could be that mammoths are doing the same thing. And they're deliberately, yeah, I want written down, okay? If you're saying yes, I want it written down.
Yeah, okay.
But
I've got enough story about elephants next week.
Good.
And there's programs on elephants.
Right.
No, I presume somebody's made a correlation between Indians and buffaloes, and they've seen that happen.
Yeah, but the Native Americans, right? The Native Americans would only kill a small number of them.
That's right, and they only killed what they wanted.
Yeah, and they needed, because the Native Americans knew.
What you're saying.
The Native Americans, yeah, sorry, we're agreeing. The Native Americans knew that if you kill all these beasts, there'd be the rotting carcasses on the plain, attracting other animals, vultures, wolves, and all sorts of bloody things, and it would in turn wipe out your own human population. Now, this is the last bit here, right? That headline there. Sophisticated hunters not to blame for driving mammoths to extinction. And why? Woolly mammoths and other giant ice age mammals faced extinction in North America 2,000 years before deadly spear tips were invented. Pat, this is about North America. You're not allowed to fall asleep on this one. This is about you.
Right, I'm here.
Now, woolly mammoths and other large lumbering beasts faced extinction in North America long before early humans perfected the skills as spearmaker scientists say. Say, for example, anyone thinking about this? Say, for example, people got to North America as far back as 18,000 years ago. That's blasphemy, okay? But it's quite possible. But we think that people got to North America sometime around 16,000 years ago. The Clovis people that lived 14,000 years ago at the Clovis site, which is in New Mexico way or somewhere like that. I'm not exactly sure, but anyway, the Clovis people. It's believed that the Clovis people themselves had really sophisticated spear points and arrowheads and all the rest of it. But before 14,000 years ago, the people weren't that sophisticated. And there's no way that a few hundred people would be able to hunt down every single mammoth. It's completely illogical. They'd have to have dealt with everything else as well. So in other words, from 16,000 years ago in North America, as humans got there, mammoths were already on the decline. So therefore, humans were not to blame for the extinction of the mammoth. Let's go on with this. The animals, which included mammoths, elephant-sized mastodons, yes, and beavers the size of black bears. Okay, so in other words, the Lion and the Witch and the Wardrobe, where you've got beavers, yeah, that's all true. And so Star Wars, where it says, in a galaxy far, far away, anyway, moving on, were probably picked off, it says here, all these were probably picked off by more inept hunters who only much later developed specialized weapons when their prize catches become scarce. I would completely disagree with that, and it goes on to say some people thought humans arrived and decimated the populations of these animals. It's unlikely that inept hunters would have been able to kill these mammoths and mastodons, there was another cause for it. This article isn't actually the best article in the world. It sort of agrees and disagrees with itself at the same time. It's unlikely that human beings decimated the populations. Archaeological evidence say that by the time the Clovis people of North America crafted spear tips and so on, it's very likely that most of the mammoths were already dead at that point, and any that were left may have been picked off. But it seems unlikely again that they would have picked off these mammoths, because mammoths themselves are very, very dangerous beasts. It goes on to say, Jill's team rules out by putting a more accurate date on the decline and fall of the woolly mammoths and more than 30 other large animals that dominated the landscape as the ice sheets retreated from North America. Among these giant sloths the size of SUVs. Okay, what we're saying is that it's being counted out. It's being dismissed that human beings were responsible for the annihilation of these wonderful mammoths. To date, the animals slide to extinction. The scientists examine. I love this bit. This is a really nice bit. It's about shit. The scientists examined sediment cores from a lake in Indiana. The deepest sediments were laid down in the distant past, while more recent sediments were nearer the surface. So in other words, nearer the surface, you don't get much dung. Down below at the bottom, you get loads of dung. Right? Now this is important. If we're going to end now, this is important. Specifically, the scientists measured levels of fungus that is known to thrive in the excrement of giant herbivorous mammals and nowhere else. They reasoned that more fungal spores meant more dung, which in turn reflected a larger population of roaming mammals. So more dung, more big beasts. The sediments also held ancient pollen and charcoal dust, which gave the team clues about the predominant plant life and frequency of wildfires. Let's read on. Researchers say, describe how the amount of mammal dung started to fall around 14,800 years ago, long before advanced spearheads become commonplace. The animals had been almost completely wiped out 1,000 years earlier, not by human beings. That's really important, and I can tell that by looking at this dung. We know there were people who predated the Clovis culture who were butchering mammoths in the area, but not many. What we're suggesting is the declines happened before the wonderful toolkits of human beings that were adapted in America. These earlier people had tools, but they weren't as sophisticated. So without sophistication, they were unable to wipe out the mammoths. People were still hunting them, but this was more challenging, so they developed somewhat better tools for the job. Another theory that the larger beasts were wiped out by an asteroid strike around 30,000 years ago also looks unlikely in view of the latest study. They don't find it in the sediments. And if an asteroid wiped out the mammoths, they would have wiped out the humans as well. By improving their hunting techniques, early humans seem to have played a major role in finishing off the woolly mammoths and 9 other mammal species that weighed over a ton. But maybe there were no mammoths for them to finish off, really. There were just 1 or 2. The study is among the first to reveal the environmental consequences of such a catastrophic decline in species. So if you forget the humans wiping out the mammoths, and they naturally died out for other reasons, this is the effect of the mammoths becoming extinct. And then we'll finish. Pollen and charcoal recovered from the sediment cores show that wildfires became far more common and that the variety of plant life changed dramatically as the nutritious and easily digestible trees and shrubs that were eaten by the mammoths grew back. Cause and effect in the summer months means that all that rich foliage would die back and would start to dry out in the wonderful rich suns of 14,000 years ago. And natural fires would be the result, meaning that you got wildfires having a catastrophic effect on the landscape, all due to the fact that the mammoths weren't there to eat the bushes in the first place. For the first time, we've got a linkage between this major ecological event, the disappearance of these large animals, and evidence of the environmental consequences. By learning about the past, you can avoid repeating past mistakes. Next week, we're going to look at Ireland. And we're going to look a little bit more about the wolves. And are there any questions?
Well, they must have got rid of their cells if they were leaving babies behind and then diving off mountainsides.
Yeah, it's all this weird stuff. You've got. It's almost as if the mammoths know, and then the mammoths know, and it's to be honest with you, this has given me more questions than I had answers before today. I wish I had more answers, and it's all down to the fact that we haven't really studied mammoths properly. Not many people, anyway. Go for it.
I think that it's great. It's exciting really because there's new stuff to discover.
There is.
But what I was thinking of, I know this is absolutely no connection at all, but in Shropshire there are 2 extinct volcanoes.
Yes.
And but I'm sure it wasn't anything to do with.
No, they were a lot early. They were a lot early. But I think the point being made is that you can't blame humans for everything. What's that?
I wondered if they might have been to do with the kettle lakes, the formation of the land, like how the land was.
But there may have been earth tremors, and there was problems with the ice, all sorts of things. Yeah. Yeah, go for it.
Mammoths died out. Why do elephants now?
Oh, bloody
That's a
hell.
good
Oh, for God's sake. Right, I haven't heard that question. And the thing is, right, actually, why did you say that at the beginning? And that's the point. That's the point. No. Human beings have been in Africa for millions of years, living alongside elephants. And Bill, in other words, what we can see is human concepts. We do have respect for mammoths, and people have got respect for elephants as well. So by blaming human beings all the time for everything on this planet, I think climatologists are saying is wrong. But then again, if you told
elephants, they're hunting the tusk of them.
Yeah, but that's now. But elephants are still with us. Okay.
Yeah.
You are right. If elephants living in Africa with thousands of human beings around should have become extinct as well, but they didn't.
No mammoths have been found in southern continents.
No.
Africa.
No.
So it must have evolved as similar species.
Yes.
At the same time.
So why did mammoths become extinct and not elephants? And I tell you what, thanks for that.
Good old Bill.
Good old Bill.
I know what it was. A few mammoths escaped across, right, to like places like Africa, and they shed their furriness and became smooth.
It was all linked up. It was all linked up, so don't worry about it. Just get over
That's
that.
what I'm saying. They went up, so they walked all the way from the cold places when they couldn't find food.
Going to do this right. The woolly mammoths evolved from elephants. We'll do that way. It makes it easier. Let's just keep it easy. Right.
I didn't know that there were elephants out there then.
Yes. There's always been elephants in Africa for many millions of years.
So that was
Are there any more questions, folks?
I'm only new, aren't I?
No.
I don't know.
Hey, nobody else knows anything in the room either. Right. Okay. Next week we're doing the island bit. And any more questions on today? Have you all enjoyed it? Good. Tarzan protected the African elephants, and that is true.
And he'd only saved the woman if her name was.
Yes, he did. Right, thank you very much, folks. Bill, when's your bus?
Oh, you such a way to I got to fight.
When is your bus now? Anyway, have you all enjoyed today? Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.